pain and all the struggles. They gotta really love you. You never let my side, I wanna embrace you, I wanna hug you. The devil is a liar, his tongue is so deceitful. I used to have a lot of fear, dear God, you the greatest. I know, God knows I'm a child of his. I've got nothing to fear, thanks for the blessings, Lord. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the
Bring the family together with great specials. Like 2 kg Sunlight hand washing powder for only $41.99 and Shield Roll-On deodorant for just $14.69.
I'll be your lighthouse and bring you back to me.
We're here for you.
With you today why it is very, very important that you read the set works, why you read literature in general. Okay, so let me just share my screen with you. And hello to everybody that's joined now. Please make sure you type hi in the chat box. So I've got a record of your participation. Okay, let me move this up here. So I want to look at why do we study literature. It's a very, very important thing, especially if you want to do well in English, all right, or in other subjects too. The skills you learn when you read literature, when you do comprehensions, will help you in all subjects, not just English. Okay, okay, so let's get started. Why study literature? Now, the origin of the words you are reading are my mind, says Jason Slavin, front-end developer. So he's a software developer. And he obviously believes in studying literature. And why is this? Because the origin of the words you are reading are my mind. Words come from the mind. And I have a way to put them on a page for you to read, right? That's what we call writing. That's how we know what people are thinking. You are reading my thoughts right now. How interesting is that? We are reading thoughts. That's what we do when we read books. By learning literature, you are opening gateways into the minds of people of the past and the present. Literature teaches us about other times, other people, other scenarios, but all of these others become internalized, become part of you, and they make us rethink ourselves, our time, people in general, and our experiences. How do, for example, political movements get started? Because people have to understand the situation that other people find themselves in. How do working conditions improve? Because it's through communicating the experiences that people live that we understand ways in which to improve working conditions, societies, laws, etc. It's a very important thing to be able to empathize, to have, to understand others' experiences. Literature helps us form ideas, see the world from other perspectives, not just our own little narrow bubble that we live in, shift our ideologies and expose others' ideologies. Now, what do we mean by an ideology? I found a nice definition here. An ideology, let's just move this up. An ideology is a set of opinions or beliefs of a group or an individual. So, it could be religious, it could be social, it could take the form of many things. Very often, ideology refers to a set of political beliefs or a set of ideas that characterize a particular culture, that give a culture its character. So, for example, these are some forms of ideology. Capitalism, where we believe in the ability to make yourself rich through working hard, through investing in the stock market, etc. Or communism, which believes in the opposite thing, where there should be no capitalism, where everybody should be equal, and you work towards a sort of a grand equal profit for all. Socialism, where people are important, where people matter. There's more of an idea of community in socialism. And then Marxism. So this is based on the philosopher Karl Marx, who was quite against capitalism, the greed of capitalism. So you can look at these ideologies for yourself. I just wanted to give you some examples of, for example, political ideologies. Have a look at those for yourself, and that will give you a better idea of what is meant by ideologies. Why do we need to know other people's ideologies? Because it explains where they are coming from. Okay, and that will help you to better understand your world and where you are coming from. Now, here's another nice explanation as to why you should bother reading literature. This has come from this website here. I've tried to include the links where I've taken ideas from. So if you feel the need, please have a look at these for yourselves. Some people think of the act of reading as a straightforward task that's easy to master. In reality, it's a complex process that draws on many different skills. Together, these skills lead to the ultimate goal of reading comprehension, or understanding what's being read. Why do you bother reading? You read for understanding. And how do we test your understanding and your reading skills? In comprehensions. And that's the kind of thing that you get in exams all the time, comprehension. To understand what you're reading, you need to understand most of the words in the text. Having a strong vocabulary is a key component of reading comprehension. Students can learn vocabulary through instruction, through teaching. But they typically learn the meaning of words through everyday experience. Okay, every day you'll encounter things in newspapers, on posters, on billboards, whatever it might be, that help you to encounter new words that you've never heard of before. And then also by reading. Read books that you love. If you come across a word you don't know, look it up. Yes, I know it's tedious, but now with technology it's so much easier. You don't even have to go find the dictionary. You've got your phone, your tablet, your PC right there. You can look it up and look at the meaning. Write down the word, write down its meaning. This is the way that you will reinforce vocabulary. Okay. So, hello to those of you who are just joining us. Let's carry on. Understanding how sentences are built is another thing. Might seem like a writing skill. So how to construct sentences, and you'll see in a lot of your marked assignments that you get back that you will probably make sentence structure errors, those SS codes or sentence codes that are in the side of your essay. It means that you have not written your sentence in a way that it makes sense, either incomplete or you join two complete sentences together. So it's actually a skill to get this right. So understanding how sentences are built might seem like a writing skill. So might connecting ideas within and between sentences, which is called cohesion. But these skills are important for reading comprehension as well. And I can certainly verify that as a marker that when I read somebody's assignment, if the sentences don't make sense, I've got to really struggle. I've got to work out what the writer means, what the student means, because the sentences don't cohere well. Okay, so this is why it's very important to master sentence writing skills. It's actually a reading skill as well as a writing skill. Right? Let's go down a little bit here. Knowing how ideas link up at the sentence level helps kids, students, get meaning from passages and entire texts. It also leads to something called coherence, or the ability to connect ideas to other ideas in an overall piece of writing. So you move on from one idea to another idea and you build up a bigger picture. Most readers relate what they've read to what they know, and that's normal. Okay, so you will always write from your point of view of the world around you. So it's important for students to have background or prior knowledge about the world when they read. They also need to be able to read between the lines. Sometimes when somebody says something, they don't mean exactly what they're saying, and you've got to be able to read between the lines. You'll encounter this kind of thing when you listen to politicians, when you listen to salesmen, when you're given job offers. All of these things will impact your life in some way. So learn to read between the lines. It's a skill. Okay? They also need to be able to read between the lines and extract meaning, even when it's not literally spelled out. Okay? So this is the kind of thing, for example, metaphors, or similes. The meaning of these things are not precise. Okay, he is a pig, for example. The person being referred to is not a pig. The person is speaking metaphorically about this other person. All right, so that is the way that we use language. And how can we read between the lines there? Well, obviously this person is either greedy, thoughtless, selfish. That's what we're doing. We're reading between the lines to see what the speaker means when they refer to this other person as a pig. Here's a last idea about reading and why you should do it. Take this example. A child is reading a story about a poor family in the 1930s. Having knowledge about the Great Depression can provide insight into what's happening in the story. If you don't know about the Great Depression, some of the ideas in the story are going to confuse you. The child can use that background knowledge to make inferences, to make guesses, and to draw conclusions about what's going on in the story. So just as an example of this kind of idea of why you should bother to read text, to expand your knowledge, your vocabulary, your writing skills, all of the above, I've decided to use Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. Now, lots of you have chosen not to read this text because there is the option between Of Mice and Men or The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. Do not worry if you have not read Of Mice and Men. I'm simply trying to illustrate concepts to you about why reading is important overall. Okay, so don't stress. You don't have to read Of Mice and Men if you've chosen to read The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. And in fact, perhaps next week we will look at The Boy in the Striped Pajamas as a heads up for you to get some reading done, okay? So if we looked at Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, there's a crucial concept behind it. Much of Steinbeck's works explore the struggles of the poor Californian wanderers, the unemployed, who were forced to travel around the state looking for work wherever they could find it. Okay, and why is this? Because the novel is set during the Depression in America. So here's a bit of history coming in. The Depression took place in 1929 to 1939. And what exactly was it? Well, let's have a look. The Great Depression. Notice the capitalization because it's a concept, it's a proper noun, it is a thing. The Great Depression was the worst economic downturn in the history of the industrialized world, lasting from 1929 to 1939, so an entire decade. It began after the stock market crash of October 1929, which sent Wall Street, and look that up for yourselves, Wall Street into a panic and wiped out millions of investors. So people had invested money, the stock market crashed, and their money was gone. Imagine all your savings, all your life savings, gone. What are you going to do? Over the next several years, consumer spending, people that buy things, consumer spending and investment dropped, so nobody wanted to spend money, causing steep declines in industrial output and employment as failing companies laid off workers. And in fact, something like that might be happening here in the world at the moment. By 1933, when the Great Depression reached its lowest point, the most difficult point, some 15 million Americans were unemployed and nearly half the country's banks had failed. So it impacted everybody's lives. Now, let's take a look down here, looking more closely at the book. Now you have the background. Great. So you know something about the Great Depression. How can we relate this to the book? The main characters in Of Mice and Men, George and Lenny, embody the struggle of the wanderers and provide an example of how workers were victimized at that time. So they were exploited by those who had more power, more land, and more money. We've seen this kind of behavior in other places as well. However, their tragedy is offset by the compassion and loyalty They share for one another. In other words, there is hope beyond the financial, the economical, the power status in these stories. The hope is the human condition, relying on others, having someone to depend on. Here's a little picture of migrant farmers in California. They would have moved from place to place. These migrant farmers were lucky enough to have a vehicle to actually move in. Most of them would have been carrying their goods with them. And so it was a very, very difficult life. Let's have a look at some of the extracts and keep this idea of the economic depression in mind as we read through the extracts. This comes from page 4 of the text. For a moment, the place was lifeless, and then 2 men emerged from the path and came into the opening by the green pool. They had walked in single file down the path, and even in the open, one stayed behind the other. Both were dressed in denim trousers and in denim coats with brass buttons. It sounds almost like a uniform of sorts, doesn't it? And denim is very durable. It's quite a tough fabric. Both wore black, shapeless hats, and both carried tight blanket rolls slung over their shoulders. So they're carrying the bare minimum. They're carrying blankets for sleeping. Okay? The first man was small and quick, dark of face, with restless eyes and sharp, strong features. Okay, so when you have restless eyes, it says something about you. It says you're taking a lot of things in. Okay? Every part of him was defined. Small, strong hands, slender arms, a thin and bony nose. Okay, so he is one character. The next character. Behind him walked his opposite, a huge man, shapeless of face, with large, pale eyes, with wide, sloping shoulders, and he walked heavily, dragging his feet a little. He's obviously a bit tired and exhausted, the way a bear drags his paws. Right, remember when I was talking about inferences and about having to work out meanings and read between the lines? Well, what can we read between the lines here with this metaphor? He's like a bear who's dragging his paws. Right. In other words, he's a big man who is exhausted. He cannot do much more. His arms did not swing at his sides, but hung loosely. He is so energyless at this point in time. Let's have a closer look. The first man stopped short in the clearing, and the follower nearly ran over him. Okay, so obviously the big man is not really observing everything around him. Okay, he's tired mentally as well as physically. Thank you for your message that you're late. Don't worry. Thank you for coming. We're looking at Of Mice and Men. Okay, so the first man stopped short in the clearing, and the follower nearly ran over him. He took off his hat, wiped the sweatband with his forefinger, and snapped the moisture off. In other words, they're both sweating. When do we sweat? Well, when we've been exerting ourselves. And it must be because they've been walking for so long. His huge companion dropped his blankets and flung himself down. He's so eager to rest that he just flings himself down. It's quite a violent action almost. Flung himself down and then drank from the surface of the green pool. So there's some water. Drank from the surface of the green pool. He drank with long gulps. He's obviously very thirsty, snorting into the water like a horse. Okay, so he's so enthusiastic about this drinking of the water. He's so thirsty. He's making almost horse-like sounds, snorting. Okay, the small man stepped nervously beside him. So whatever this large man is doing makes the small man a bit nervous. "Lenny," he said sharply. "Lenny, for God's sake, don't drink so much." Lenny continued to snort into the pool. So is Lenny listening? No, Lenny's not listening. The small man leaned over and shook him by the shoulder, trying to get through to him. "Lenny, you're going to be sick like you was last night." All right, so what does this tell you about the speaker, the person that is speaking here? The fact that he says, you're going to be sick like he was last night. Anybody got any suggestions as to why he's talking like that? What does it tell us? Good. Yes, it should have been were. You're going to be sick like you were last night. But he doesn't. He says like he was. What does this tell us about the speaker? We've got to read between the lines here. We've got to use every single piece of information we've got. We've got to be detectives. He isn't very educated. Brilliant. Yes. He isn't very educated. So now we understand a little bit more why they're in these sort of denim outfits, sort of working outfits, walking, toiling, carrying blankets. They're not educated, so they probably won't be working in some sort of office environment, okay? They probably will be laborers of the land, and they are poor, yes. And maybe their English is bad. Yes, and usually, for Americans, English to be bad is probably because they're uneducated, they're at a certain social level, and they are poor. Mostly the poor will be uneducated. They can't afford to get educated. They've got to make a living. They've got to go and get the crops in, kind of thing. So this really gives us a lot of information just about these two characters based on the way that they speak, or at least one of them are speaking. Very nice suggestions, guys. Thank you so much. Okay. And if you're poor, you cannot afford education. Exactly. So it's like this vicious cycle. And that's exactly what's been happening to these migrant workers as a whole. But how John Steinbeck, the author, wants to show you by putting these ideas into practice with characters, showing you how this kind of lifestyle could actually affect the real lives of characters, of people back then. Right? Now, Lenny dipped his whole head under the water. So he's not even listening about, he doesn't care about he's going to be sick. He just dips his whole head under, hat and all, okay? And then he sat up on the bank, and his hat dripped down on his blue coat and ran down his back. So he looks like a bit of a mess right now. That's good, he said. Look, notice once again, huh? You drink some, George. Now we get George's name. You take a good, big drink. He smiled happily. And for those of you who have read Of Mice and Men, don't worry if you haven't, remember this is just for illustrative purposes, you will know that Lenny is mentally disabled. So he struggles. He's even in a worse position. He's very bad with people. He can't communicate. He gets carried away a little bit like a child. He just follows his emotions, so he does things spontaneously. And we see that right now here. He doesn't care about how sick he was last night. That doesn't bother him. He's thirsty now. He wants to satiate his thirst, to quench his thirst now. So he drinks up deeply now. He doesn't care that it's a green pool, that it could make him sick. Doesn't listen to George at all. And what does he do? He actually says, now, George, you should drink. It was so good. It's almost like he hasn't even heard George. So we get a lot of information from this particular extract about these characters. I'm just going to look at the chat again because there's some options. So people are saying that if you can't afford education, it would be very boring. Yes, life would be boring. What would you do? You couldn't, or life wouldn't necessarily be boring because you'd have to constantly work out in the fields or the gardens to get food, or you'd have to probably go begging. You'd have to do something in order to get that food. And so education, very important. That's why we're all here. Okay. So what are we doing? How are we doing? Okay. So I also included another extract. This comes from page 14. And as they're lying here, we get more of an insight into the kinds of lives that George and Lenny lead, as will other migrant workers at the time. And this is why it's so important to read literature, because it does make the struggles come to life. So let's have a look. George's voice became deeper, so a bit more serious perhaps. He repeated his words rhythmically in time to a certain rhythm, as though he had said them many times before. In other words, he has said them many times before. And if you think about the kinds of things, when we think about stories, things that we repeat over and over, they do have a certain rhythm to them. Once upon a time, and they lived happily ever after. These kind of things show a repetition, a structure, and this is what George is doing here. So he repeated his words rhythmically, as though he had said them many times before. Guys like us that work on ranches are the loneliest guys in the world. They got no family. They don't belong no place. They come to a ranch and work up a steak, work up a salary, sort of a wage for that amount of time, and then they go into town and blow their steak, and their salary's gone because they're so happy to have a bit of money that they go and blow it, okay? And the first thing you know, they're pounding their tail on some other ranch. They're working their guts out on some other ranch. They ain't got nothing to look ahead to. Right? So this is his formulaic opening to something he regularly tells Lenny. Lenny was delighted. Okay, so he's getting excited now because now George's going to talk about what to look forward to, look ahead to. That's it. Now tell her how it is with us. Okay, so he's a bit like a child. He wants this story to be told. There's comfort to be gained from storytelling. George went on. With us, it ain't like that. We got a future. We got somebody to talk to that gives a damn about us. We don't have to sit in no bar room blowing in our drink just because we got no place else to go. If them other guys gets in jail, they can rot for all anybody gives a damn. But not us. Lenny broke in. But not us. And why? Because I got you to look after me, and you got me to look after you, and that's why. He laughed delightedly again. Go on now, George. Carry on with the story. Okay, he loves this idea. He loves the story. You got it by heart. You know it by heart. You can do it yourself. No, you. I forget some of the things. Tell about how it's going to be. Okay. Someday, we're going to get the jack together. We're going to have the money. We're going to get the money together. And we're going to have a little house and a couple of acres and a cow and some pigs and then probably Lenny interrupts to add his little ideas as well. Okay. So, I've got some messages coming through on the chat. Okay. All right. So, yes, going on with this idea of an uneducated life being kind of boring, and perhaps even that some life is a highway, relating to the idea of these wanderers wandering the highways, working on ranches, having nowhere to live. Okay. So, can you see how this characterization, this storytelling, brings the depression to life in a way, and helps you to understand exactly how people must have felt, the kinds of experiences they have. If you read the rest of the novel, it is such a struggle for George and Lenny to fit into the new ranch they go to work on. They are viewed suspiciously because Lenny is mentally handicapped. He struggles even more. People can't understand him, and he's huge, so he gets picked on for his size. There's violence. There's racism. One of the ranch workers is a black African worker, and he gets picked on all the time, an African American, and because of his race. There's sexism because the main lady character, his name I can't remember right now. Do one of you remember it? Let's just have a look on the chat. Okay, don't worry if you don't. If you look at her, she is very much typecast, stereotype. She has to look pretty. She flirts with the men. She talks in a certain way. And so there are lots of social problems that are explored in this novella. It's a novella because it's a shortened kind of a novel. And this just gives you more insight into what's going on. So if you got a comprehension in an exam that was set in the Depression era, you'd have more to say about it. And also, it doesn't have to necessarily be in the Depression era. It could just be about migrant workers and the difficulties that they face. You can put this kind of concept into many time periods where migrant workers struggle.